The Gemara tells us in Shabbos and Daf Mem Tesam and Aleph, as well as the Gemara later on in the 19th Perek, a famous incident with Elisha Bal Knafayim, with Elisha the master of wings, not the Elisha the Navi, but Elisha, one of the rabbis. So the Gemara tells us the Roman government made a decree against putting on tefillin. For Jews, it is prohibited to put on tefillin, and if one is caught wearing tefillin, they risk the death penalty. And apparently Elisha disregarded this ban, and anyway he continued to wear his tefillin in public. And one time, I guess he was in public, the Roman officer noticed that Elisha was wearing tefillin. And then when the officer tried to apprehend him, Elisha took off. And he ran into an alleyway, he removed his tefillin, and claimed he was just holding dove wings in his hand. So of course the officer said, "Let me see." And the Gemara tells us that tefillin miraculously turned into dove wings, and all the Roman officer was able to find. Therefore he's known as Elisha Bal Knafayim. So that's the famous Gemara in terms of that. There's a famous question the Rishonim asked, the Bali Tosfos and others is, we have a principle, the Gemara tells us in Sanhedrin, on Ayin Daled Amid Aleph in Sanhedrin, that in general there's halacha, we know for the big three, one has a mitzvah of Kiddush Hashem. One has a mitzvah to sanctify their life and to go al Kiddush Hashem. So you have, if someone puts a gun to your head and says worship idols, commit adultery, or murder someone else, the halacha is yarog v'al yavo. Better to give up your life al Kiddush Hashem than have the stain of that sin on your neshama. And however, for the 610 other mitzvahs, we say yarvor v'al yarog. Better to violate Shabbos achaz, violate one aveira, in order that you could keep mitzvahs for the rest of your life. Shamu when it is Shabbos, the same source we talk about violating Shabbos or Shabbos emergency, that we look at the big picture. But apparently for the big three, those type of three sins, is better to die a life al Kiddush Hashem. But all the other mitzvahs we assume v'chai bahem v'lo yamus bahem. However, the Gemara tells us in Sanhedrin Ayin Daled that b'shas hashmad, during the time of religious persecution, afila mitzvah kala, even on a lighter mitzvah, one is obligated to give up their life. The Gemara gives an example, even if they ask you to change shoelaces, etc., red or blue, red or black, change. So that's the Gemara. So Tosfos asks over here, he says, why did Elisha remove the tefillin from his head and let them turn into a dove wings? The Gemara tells us in Sanhedrin, B'shas hashmad, during the time of danger, one has an obligation to give up their life. So since the decree was against the observance of the mitzvah of tefillin, he should have continued wearing his tefillin. That's the kasha. By the way, it's a machlokas rishonim, but the Gemara talks about that certain mitzvahs the Jewish people accepted b'simcha, that even applies today. The other mitzvahs the Jews didn't. An example of a mitzvah b'simcha is Milah, Yom Kippur. So even many observant Jews today keep tefillin, keep Milah and Yom Kippur. An example of a mitzvah not accepted b'simcha was the mitzvah of tefillin. In fact, some Rishonim find a problem with Elisha for taking off his tefillin. Others say no, Elisha wasn't the problem, it was everyone else. Elisha did the right thing, the other people weren't wearing. So one summer, The Chabad are very meticulous in the mitzvah of tefillin. We know they're famous for the tefillin mobiles. They go around a big mitzvah getting people who don't put on tefillin to wear tefillin. So one time they came around on a Friday. They were in Hamilton, and I was in the back barbecuing, and someone came to my door, and they said, did you put on tefillin? So I said, Rashi or Rabbeinu Tam? And then he said, and I said, do you know why you have to do this? Of course I got a blank look, and I told him the Gemara in Shabbos, that since the Jews do not accept tefillin b'simcha, so therefore it's very hard to get them to put it on, and therefore you have to go around. So either way, the kasha of Tosfos is, why is it that Elisha took his tefillin off? It's Shas Hashmad, Afila Mitzvah Kala. So many Rishonim answer, I think it's the Ran and the Ramah brings it down in Shulchan Aruch, that there's a distinction between, we find this distinction throughout, a distinction between lo saseis, not violating a negative commandment, while merely not fulfilling a positive commandment. Violating a negative commandment is worse than merely not performing a positive commandment, because violating a negative commandment, the Meshech Chochmah, the Ramban explained, that shows you have no fear of God. Merely not putting on tefillin, this shows you're lacking love of God. But on the other hand, aseh docha lo saseh, showing love for God is better than observing a negative, which is just showing you don't fear God. So either way, do we see a distinction that for a mitzvah kala, you're allowed to spend, they talk about for how much the limit is to spend on a mitzvah, 20%, but on not to violate an Aveira, sometimes you have to give up kol mamon, all your money. Or we find, yesh koach b'yad chachamim, the Gemara in Yevamos, at least the way we paskin, that the yesh koach b'yad chacham l'akord v'ator b'shei v'ataseh. There is a power among the Chachamim to uproot a mitzvah by merely telling you not to do it. So they point out that that's only they have the power to tell you not to do it, like not to blow shofar on Shabbos. But they can't tell you you could go to McDonald's and have a Big Mac, because that's kum ba'aseh. So we find distinctions throughout. So the Rishonim point out, when do we say b'shas hashmad? One has to be willing to give up the life. That is to violate a negative commandment. However, failure to perform a positive commandment is only shevi al tasa as being passive, and therefore one does not have to give up the life. And that's why Elisha did the right thing by taking off his tefillin. And in fact, that's what they point out. The Gemara says in the beginning of Shabbos regarding this Chanukah sugya, that b'shas sakana meishniach al shulchanu v'daya. During the time of danger, you took off your tefillin, you moved, instead of lighting near Chanukah outside, you lit it inside. The kash is, why? It's Shas Hashmad. They should be willing to give up their life and light outside. So the different answers. One answer is they're not changing the mitzvah, they're only moving it from outside to inside. But one answer is, as we just said, because not fulfilling Chanukah is only a mitzvah saseh, so that you don't have to give up your life for. That's one answer to Rishonim, the distinction between violating a lo saseh versus merely not performing an aseh. To violate a lo saseh b'shas hashmad, that you have to give up your life for, but merely not to perform a mitzvah saseh, you don't have to. Others point out, the Ritva and others, that regarding the mitzvah of tefillin, the minimum mitzvah of tefillin is that you put on your tefillin once a day. The minhag was that people wore tefillin all day. So since Elisha already fulfilled his mitzvah of tefillin, so therefore there's only a minhag Hasidus to wear tefillin the whole day, like Anshe Yushalayim, they used to carry around the Daled Minim all day. But Mikra Adin, the mice, you do one mice in the Tila of Daled Minim in the morning, you Yotze. So on a Minei Chasidus, on something that wasn't obligated, so therefore one does not, you've already fulfilled your basic obligation of tefillin, hence there's no need to give up your life. And the Sfas Emes on Daf Kuf Lamed, he wants to suggest a different explanation. The Gemara on Kuf Chav Zayin Amud Beis points out that Rabbi Yeshua removed his tefillin before entering a certain house where his people were, and he felt it was because it was improper to wear holy tefillin in an unholy place. So the Sfas Emes wants to say similar. It wasn't that he was afraid, Elisha. That's why he took off his tefillin. If he was afraid, he didn't want to put him on in the first place. But the reason why he took him not because he was afraid, is because he felt it wasn't proper to wear tefillin in the presence of this unholy soldier in this place, and therefore that's why he took them off. So to summarize, that's what we explained here. The famous incident with Elisha Baal Kanafayim, that's why he was known as Elisha, the master of those, and he wore tefillin even though when everyone else didn't wear. And one time he took them off, and the shayla is, why take them off? Isn't it Yaro v'al Yavu, or don't you have to give up your life? Don't you have to give up your life? B'shas hashmad, even al mitzvah kala. So there are at least three approaches we'll take today. One is the distinction between an aseh versus a los aseh. You only have to give up your life if you're going to violate a los aseh. Merely not to fulfill a mitzvah aseh, that you don't have to give up your life. So merely not putting on tefillin is an aseh, or near Chanukah is only an aseh. The second approach by the Ritva is by Chanukah, by tefillin, by other mitzvahs, by lulav. You fulfill the mitzvah with the minimum requirement. You don't by Chanukah just have to light a half an hour or so. The other mitzvahs you just light. So therefore, when it comes to tefillin and lulav, so you fulfilled your basic mitzvah. So therefore, you don't have to give up your life on a midas chasidus of wearing tefillin all day. And thirdly, the Sfas Emes is more that he took of his tefillin because he felt it wasn't appropriate to wear tefillin in front of this person, like we see Rabbi Shua taking off his tefillin when he walked in, when he was going to go into a place where there be unholy people around.